Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum, and today we are back talking about aircraft in our collection with, I am appropriately donned with, the Prowler, the EA-6B Prowler. This is as close as Greg could get to a Prowler. This also, by the way, has to be one of the most elaborate headgear thingamybobs Greg has ever put me in. He is my halcyon assistant, Greg Kenny. I'm going to get this off, and I'm going to, oh, that actually came off better than I thought it was going to. We're going to go off camera to the Kenny with another excellent catch. And today we're going to be talking about what I think the aircraft was. We're going to talk about its retirement starting in about 2014. But I have always thought that this is a tremendously cool airplane. The Grumman, the EA-6B, the Prowler. Now I've got my, by the way, Greg, did you notice I have my Grumman shirt on today? I'm going completely with it. Now, the EA-6B is a derivative of an aircraft we've already done, which is the A6. The A6 was a strike airplane. This is a derivative. They added a back seat. Now, there are versions of the airplane. There's the A and the B. We're going to talk a little bit about it, but not a whole bunch. We're going to talk about the type and the concept primarily. The idea was we were getting into electronic warfare was becoming more and more dominant when you put together a strike package.
A carrier is a world of experts and specialists dedicated to air operations, one of the most complex forms of naval warfare. Every man on deck is an expert in the teams of specialists responsible for putting the planes in the air. The aircraft are specialists too, the best of their kind for the jobs they've been assigned in the upcoming mission. An E-2C will be the high-altitude platform for command and control. The A-6s will deliver the ordnance. The F-14s will fly barrier. The A-7s will handle flak suppression, and the EA-6Bs will protect them, providing an electronic shield during the most critical minutes of the mission.
It was no longer, we're going to put together 1,000 bombers, and in World War II, we put 1,000 or 10,000 or 5,000 bombers up, and there was so much noise, and the thing was so long, the bomber train was so long, especially in Europe. They knew you were coming. You could not hide. But as electronic warfare evolved, it had to be, especially with the advent of those sophisticated Warsaw Pact radars and that layered air defense, both directed anti-aircraft artillery that was radar directed, as well as anti-aircraft missiles, which became increasingly dangerous in North Vietnam with the from SA-3s up to SA-6. You were starting to see a threat to these aircraft that was serious and couldn't be ignored. One thing it did, and we've talked about that before, is it pushed airplanes down to flying nap of the earth very, very low. So it pushed them down, and you didn't see that really change up until the F-117, although we're going to talk about why electronic jamming, even in the era of an F-117, which is, by the way, not invisible, it's just invisible to radar, you still needed a jamming capability. So the Navy and the Marines came up with this, and the idea behind it was there were two things they were going to replace. One is they were going to replace, the Marines were going to replace their EF-10B Skyknights, and then the Navy was going to replace its EKA-3B Sky Warriors. And the idea was where they needed something that could jam this enemy air defense. So Greg, we're going to go back a little bit though to the very beginning. And the very beginning was in Europe, The Germans actually developed a really good layered air defense network. And there were two pieces to it. There was one piece which was daylight defense, and that was built around fighter groups. And the Germans had adopted what the British had done, which was they had chain radars. They would figure out where the bomber streams were going, and then they would vector these fighters in to the bomber streams, and the rest we've been over before. At night, they would do the same thing. Because remember, the Americans were doing daylight raids. The British were doing nighttime carpet bombing in sections. And the Germans had developed airborne radars, which that speaks kind of the first generation of this. They developed actual airborne homing radars that were interlocked with these chain radars. In other words, and they weren't interlocked electronically, but by voice. The British and the Americans they started dropping, Greg, appropriately known as foo. Foo. Greg is like, foo? Yes, foo. Now, what was foo? Obviously, it was two things. One, the name of a band, Greg, the Foo Fighters. Obviously, they live on. Actually, that was named by one of the guys, either a parent or his grandfather or somebody was in the Foo Fighters. That was a group they called themselves that dropped the Foo. But the Foo was chaff. It was essentially strips of aluminum foil, and what it would do, the radar would reflect off of it and pretty much just blind all these chain radars. It would also cause problems for the German night fighters. So fast forward, we learned that it actually worked. I mean, it worked really well. Very simple concept. But that was very early. There were other things that the Allies did and the Germans did to jam each other's radars and communications. But fast forward, and now we're on steroids because the Marines and the Navy, in order to replace those Sky Knights and those Sky Warriors, have decided that they need a much better electronic warfare aircraft. And so, hence, looking at the A6, Grumman decided if you added a back seat to that, I'm going to go ahead and pick this up. Another, Greg, really nice model. Look at this. This is a nice one today. But I'm going to give you a plan view of the airplane. They added this back seat, and then you could add electronic warfare officers back there. Now, they packed this thing with all kinds of electronic warfare equipment. On this, you can see some of the jamming pods. Now, this little spinner on the front, what does that do, Greg? That actually spins, and these can be used for various things, but that's an auxiliary power unit when that spins.
As a weapon system, it can be armed as needed from its own electronic arsenal. 5 jammer pods, each with a fore and aft station, provide a total of 10 very high-powered jamming transmitters. Coverage of enemy frequency bands can be complete. With the appropriate mixture of pods and fuel tanks, the Prowler can do its job on missions of force defense, war at sea, or projection of power over land.
These aircraft were incredibly effective, and what would end up happening was they would fly with every package. Either the EF-111, which we talked about, was the derivative from that GTX program, right? That early fighter program. So either the F-111, the EF version, electronic warfare version, or the Prowler would fly with these packages. Now, the first flight of this aircraft was in 1968. If you can believe that, I find that hard to believe. And then the intro was in 1970, 1971. They were retired by the Navy, and we're going to talk about this airplane behind me, by the Navy in 2014. And they were retired by the Marine Corps in 2019 after coming into service all that time. Now, the aircraft was subsonic. 651 miles an hour was its maximum speed. Pretty versatile, though, at low level. And these air crews trained at low level. There was an antenna in here. There was all kinds of electronic warfare devices. And the aircraft was continually upgraded. Now, another thing about this, Greg, is it could harm people. Do you like that, Greg? A little play on words there. Harm. Homing anti-radiation missile. Harm. Get it? Ha! I'm a jokester today. But it could lock on to these emitters. What it would do, there were two things in electronic warfare capacity if it's flying with the package. One was it could find the emitter. So the emitter is the radar sweeper do. You like that? That's another term, the sweeper do. You like that? That's technical, Greg. The dish. And that's emitting these radar signals that would bounce off the airplane. So what it would do is could find the emitter, it could lock on to the emitter, and then fire anti-radiation or a missile that was designed to home in on that beam. When it got to the emitter, it had ball bearings in the front of it or shrapnel. It would explode and spray that area with shrapnel. The idea was to destroy the emitter, or sometimes they were with trucks where the operators were at, and it would destroy the truck and the emitter. The other thing is the enemy would know radar when it starts, especially attack radar, starts to sweep in a certain frequency and timing. The enemy radar emitters with their sweeper doos would realize that they were locked onto. And a lot of times if they figured out, because they would be sniffing radar frequencies as well, if they figured out that they had been locked onto, what would they do, Greg? Just turn their emitters off. Well, guess what? If the emitters aren't working, the missile might as well be destroyed because it can't do anything. You can't blind fire this stuff. The missiles and the SAMs did have some capability to they either radar home in on a target like an airplane or with infrared with the jet blast, but that was, you had to get fairly close in order to do that. So they were pretty much worthless if you got the guy on the other side who was running the anti-aircraft batteries, whether they're missiles or AAA, to turn them off. And so having these in the area, even in a passive sense, once the enemy realized that these guys were sniffing around out there, they were prowling. I'm full of little puns today, Greg. It's been, see, you leave a week and I just go crazy, you know. But if they knew they were in the area, a lot of times the enemy would shut down the air defense until they had a pretty good idea that they were under attack, or that the strike package was fairly close. Then they might turn them on, but they don't leave them on all the time because these guys could home in. Now, they also could jam.
The EA-6B can jam enemy radars without affecting our own. Keeping one step ahead, it has given us a significant advantage in electronic warfare at every point in time. It's the only aircraft of its kind dedicated exclusively to fighting naval battles of electronic warfare. A pilot and 3 electronic countermeasures officers, ECMOs, fly the airplane and operate its jamming system, a third generation of the ALQ-99 that first proved out in Southeast Asia.
They had electronic jamming on board, and they could jam, figure out what frequency, they could sniff out what frequency the enemy was operating on. They could jam everything up to, Greg, garage door openers. If you can believe that. There's been reports of prowlers in Afghanistan with improvised explosive devices, IEDs, that they were using very simple electronic devices to jam, that the prowlers could actually jam down to that level of equipment. I don't know if that's true or not. I've read that. I don't have any firsthand account of that. But if that's true, that gives you an idea of the capability of electronics that are on the bird, that are actually flying in the airplane. So the aircraft was continually upgraded, and the last upgrade proposed for this, for a real airframe upgrade, the airplane, believe it or not, Greg, did have some spin and some instability issues. And so the Navy wanted to deal with those in the last upgrade, which was called the ADVCAP, ADVCAP. It was the next upgrade. It was actually killed in 1995. The Navy killed it due to budget considerations, and that essentially sealed the fate. Now, the first aircraft that was used in that prototype aircraft was Bureau number 158542. There were actually 3 more aircraft, I believe, that were used in that testing phase, they went back to AMARC, they went back to the Boneyard, and Greg, Fred, fun fact, they were actually reassembled into one airplane that went back to the fleet because it went back into service as this is the Fred fun fact, the Franken Prowler. That's pretty cool. I thought that was fun. Anyways, Greg is giving me a little head nod there, but it actually says Franken Prowler on the nose. It actually went back into service, and that's kind of cool. So they used it, and I checked the bureau number. It is not this airplane because I was like, well, maybe we have Franken Prowler, but we don't. So the last real heavy equipment upgrade on the airplane, and as far as avionics, was the ICAP 3 upgrade, which was the last heavy modification of the airframes in service. The biggest change in that is that carried an ALQ-99 tactical jamming system, and that goes back into what I was talking about with the with being able to even get down to the point of jamming individual signals as finite as a garage door opener, which you can't believe that, or I can't believe that. So I'm going to put this back here without breaking it, this very nice Prowler model, and I'm going to go over to my stage 2, which today, we're back to Melba's Fixins. Greg, you're back, and a familiar suspect here, 170 calories, so nothing out of the ordinary. I don't see a sell-by date, so this could be botulism central. I guess, Greg, you're back, so this means there's peaches and cream, right? The soda, I have no idea. It doesn't really tie into the Prowler motif, but we're going to go ahead and get this open, if I can do that. Now, this community is relatively small. There are only 170 EA-6Bs made, which is a very small run of these aircraft. But if you think about all of the people that they saved that didn't get shot down or were rescued because of when these crews went into service and the work they did, and trust me, if the enemy knew these airplanes were out there, they're trying to knock them down because the capability of this airplane was so great that it could mean the difference between you getting the heck bombed out of you or not. And so they were after these aircraft quite a bit if they knew they were in the area. So to all of the jamming crews, the folks that maintained them, the folks that flew them, the folks that worked on the equipment, we want to say, we salute you. Yeah. Greg, you can tell by my reaction, that was kind of tough. Whew. I'll try one more. I think my taste buds got jammed. Oh, no. I was a little verklempt with that one there, Greg. So the aircraft, I'm going to go ahead and pick it back up. The aircraft continued to see service. To give you an idea of its combat bandwidth, the early versions were in Vietnam, they were in Grenada, they were in Operation Desert Storm. You can imagine that in Desert Storm they were busy. Greg, 100, and we talked about those HARM missiles, those homing anti-radiation missiles, 150 were fired in Operation Desert Storm. And they had no losses of aircraft or aircrew. So they were quite prolific. They even went up into the packaging with the F-117s, and we'll talk about that when we do the profile on the F-117. But these aircraft actually flew up into they were advanced aircraft ahead of the F-117. Now there are some people, and you can argue with me, I'll get hate mail in the comments, that would argue that the one F-117 that was lost in Kosovo was lost. One of the reasons was the Prowlers were not with that strike mission. They got delayed, and there are other reasons, and we're not going to get into it. But one of the things that 117 flight did not have was it didn't have EA-6Bs. So they play a pivotal role even for those advanced cutting-edge airplanes like an F-117. So now let's talk a little bit about our airplane here. When the Navy retired the EA-6B, this aircraft was actually on the Bush, the aircraft carrier of the Bush, and flew back in, came back in from that cruise directly out of Syria. So, but it is a combat veteran. It flew in here. Greg can throw up the bureau number on the airplane. You do a little bit of research if you want. He also can get a shot on the born on date of actually when the airplane was born, that's the first time that I've ever seen that. The born on date on an airplane like that, which is kind of cool if you think about it. Makes it easier for us when we're trying to tell the story of the airplane. This aircraft came out of VAQ 134, the Gardas, and I was here when it flew in. They actually signed the intake there with the U.S. Pacific Fleet logo on there. Fonda, call sign Fonda, flew it in. Fonda, if you're still in the fleet, I want you to send me or give us a comment in there. Let us know what you're doing. I always think of you fondly, pardon the pun, when I think of Fonda. Greg, I don't know where this is coming from today. It's crazy. Greg is taking a deep breath. But the crew flew it in. We had a ceremony. We retired the airplane. Now, one thing about the airplane, when you look at it at the museum, you see it has that gold patina on the cockpit, on the canopy. You know what that is, Greg? That is a gold material that goes over the cockpit so that it doesn't emit electronic emissions. They bounce off. You know what other airplane has that? The F-117. It's the same stuff. So when you come to the museum, notice that. That's one kind of little cool thing. I noticed it when the airplane came in, but the airplane came in. It is part of our presidential aviation exhibit with obviously with George Bush and his airplane. And so we have the TBM, we have this, we have an F-102, and the F-102, of course, is junior flew. So we kind of got out some interesting airplanes there. Now, you know the airplane I want, Greg, is I want that S3 that he landed on the carrier. I don't know where that is, but I bet you it's in a museum somewhere. But we should try to get that one, fill out the exhibit a little more. But come on over and check out the Presidential Aviation exhibit. Now, there's a couple of exciting things. First of all, the construction has started on our F-117 hangar, which is south of the Miles hangar and Presidential Aviation exhibit. And the F-117, that's going to be its forever home. But if you flew, and where is the F-117 known for, right? The Gulf War, well, just like this airplane, if you flew in that Iraqi Freedom or in the Operation Desert Storm, you need one of these cool hats. It will make you 15 miles an hour faster. I haven't used that in a long time, Greg. And you need one of these. These are really cool. They'll be up on our website. Jason will go ahead and get you one out there. Jimmy John, as we call him, will get you one. So we'll get that sent out to you. But that covers the overview of this airplane. It has evolved into the F-18, the G, the Growler. Interesting play on words. And so the spirit of this advanced electronic warfare strike airplane lives on. The concept lives on. Ultimately, it's probably going to end up, we've talked about drones. It'll probably end up being taken over by drone airplanes at some point. But the F-18, the G, the Growler model, is what took over for this airplane when it was retired. Now remember, we can't restore and maintain these aircraft without your generous donations. So please go out to the website and hit us with the donation. If you're seeing this on YouTube, I hope we've earned your subscription today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, leave a comment, And I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Fred Bell. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Have a great day.